What's up, guys? Magic Libra back today with how to play Magic the Gathering for Yu-Gi-Oh players. So I thought about how to record this video, and I'm actually going to do it in parts, segments, because there is just too much to record here for it to be over an hour-long type of video. So for this specific segment, this is going to be part one. I'm just going to be telling you about the basic of the idea behind the game, and I'm going to be going over all the different card types, and then that will be it. So the basics of Magic the Gathering, like you would with Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! You have monster spells and traps, and you play cards that fight for you against your opponent to deplete your opponent's life points, to deck them out, or to win with a game condition. Well, Magic the Gathering still has those concepts to either deplete your opponent's life to 0, deck them out, or win with a certain win condition. Now, how Magic is different from Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a bit different concept. So, in Yu-Gi-Oh! You summon creatures, you cast spells, and you set traps for the opponent. In Magic, you build up mana to cast powerful spells at the opponent to try and defeat them. That's basically the two different concepts. So, with that out of the way, I wanted to go over the basics of all the cards and some of the rules. So, with that being said, we're going to slide over to the next photo. So, there are 5 colors in Magic the Gathering, which are going to be, and I'm going to start from the green one, and I'm going to go to the right, up to the top, and then circle back all the way to red. So, there are a total of 5 colors, and as you can tell, there's going to be green. There's going to be, that is known as white, even though it looks yellow, I understand, but it is called white in the game of Magic, because there are other cards that are yellow, but they look yellow, but their color is not yellow. They just look yellow. I don't know why they designed it that way, but yes. So there's green, there's white, there's blue. I know that looks purple. It's not the best photo, but it's supposed to be black and red. So there are 5 colors: green, white, blue, black, and red. The only exception to this rule, because this I will relate to Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Has 6 colors, but they're called attributes, which is dark, light, water, earth, fire, and air, whereas Magic only has 5, and they call them colors instead of, the attributes. Now, the exception to this color rule is there is technically a 6th color, but it actually doesn't have a color, and it's going to be this symbol right here. This is what's known as colorless. So, it identifies as not having a color at all. So, this specific symbol is different than literally looking at this gray symbol with a number 1 or number 2 in it. It has numbers in it. It can go up to 20. I don't care. It'll still be gray in the background, but it'll have a number. That symbol also, with the gray background and a number, also means that it's colorless. It just tells you how much mana you need to put towards whatever you're casting, whatever spell you're casting. So, with that being said, there are 5 colors with this extra colorless symbol, which kind of brings it to 6. But technically, this is not a color. These right here are what are known as basic lands, and they have each symbol on them. And you can see the green one says basic land forest, the blue says island, the red says mountain, the white says plains, and the black says swamp. So, just so you may be confused, the forest will always produce what is called a green mana. Same for all the colors. Blue will produce blue mana, red will produce red mana, white mana, black mana. And this is kind of rare. I actually don't own any lands that look like this next photo, but there are colorless lands that produce colorless mana. I don't know why you would put these in your deck, but if you're playing a colorless deck where you don't have colors, which is pretty rare, go you. But you're going to find that these lands are the most common colors, and you're going to find a bunch of these colors, and you'll love to play with these colors more than you will this color. Because if you try to play with this color, it don't have a color, and from what I hear, the cards, like the Eldrazi stuff, can get pretty expensive. But yeah, so these are basic lands, and they produce your mana that you build up in order to cast your powerful spells. So I'm going to relate this back to Yu-Gi-Oh right now. So Yu-Gi-Oh has monsters, spells, and traps. Well, Magic only has two types of cards. They have lands that produce mana, and they have spells that can become a permanent spell on the field, or they just go to the grave. Now, I'm also going to relate this back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh has specific zones for where cards go. Magic does not. It has the deck zone, it has the graveyard zone, it has the exile zone, which is equivalent to the banish zone in Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's about it. You then can choose to put your permanent cards that stay on the field wherever, and your creatures and your lands, like you can put them wherever you would like. Just make sure to keep track of it yourself and explain it to your opponent. That's all that anyone ever really asks. So moving on from the lands, we have creatures. So I wanted to move on to creatures. So I also wanted to point out every card at the top of the card has the name of the card. So this one is Wastes. That's a forest, island, mountain. All that. What I just said before. But this creature right here is named Toph Earthbender Master, or Earthbending Master. It's a creature because right below the picture it has a secondary line that tells you what kind of card it is. It is a legendary creature, so that lets you know it is a creature, or in reference to Yu-Gi-Oh, it is a monster. But it has subcategories. So, like how Yu-Gi-Oh has normal, effect, ritual, Xyz monsters, but then you've got the type of Xyz monster, it's a spellcaster or it's a dragon. That's kind of like what this is. This is a creature with a subtype of human, warrior, ally, so it's got not just one subtype, but it's got three. So that's pretty cool. And if you just skim over that part, if you look at the bottom right of the card, it has 2/4. To relate to Yu-Gi-Oh, that's its attack and defense. Yes, in that order, attack first, then defense. Because for Magic, it's not called attack and defense. It's called power and toughness. And I'll explain how that works when it goes into battling and whatnot. But this specific creature has special effects. It has, unlike Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic has keywords. So literally you have to look up every keyword. Like, I'm not kidding. You have to look up every keyword if it doesn't list in the quotes like it does right here on the bottom what the keyword does. Because there's just like so many keywords. So this specific one says landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, you get an experience counter. So you play a land and it gets an experience counter. Pretty simple, right? And it does a bunch of other shenanigans down here that I'm not going to explain. I just wanted to explain that one thing. And there are other creatures. Like this one is, if you look at the top right of this card, you can see that it is, in order to play this creature, you have to pay 1 green mana. And like how I mentioned earlier, you see that 3 with the gray in the back? That means that you have to pay 3 mana of any color or colorless mana. It doesn't matter. It actually means 3 generic mana. So long as you have mana, like say you have 10 green mana, you can pay 1 green mana for that green symbol up there, and you can pay 3 more green mana in order to play it. or you can mix it up. You can play red, blue, black, white, all that. Just as long as you pay 3. And you have to pay at least 1 green mana in order to even play this card. So that's pretty cool, pretty cool. Now there are other creatures. So there is a white one. Aang is my favorite. There's a blue one, which is Katara. There's a red one, which is Zuko. And you can tell how this card looks a little bit different. I mean, besides the color, than the rest of the cards, because you can see the borders around the pictures. That's because these are bordered cards. This is a borderless card, so it's kind of like a full art, which makes it more valuable. But it's pretty cool. And then, you've got Azula. So I've got like all 5 colors that I've listed here. Pretty cool. Now those are all of the creatures though, and I've kind of gone over what the creatures look like. So now I'm going to move on into the spells. Now again, I mentioned everything is a spell. Every single thing is a spell, and spells that are not permanent go to the grave. Creatures are permanent. So after you get done casting the creature spell, if your opponent allows it to come into play, because there are stuff that counters spells, like counter trap cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! There are stuff that counters spells, and whenever a spell is countered, it goes to the grave instead of going onto the field. So if you cast a creature spell and it is not countered, it then becomes a permanent on the field and it stays there. So that's just a cool ruling I wanted to share with y'all. But let's move on into how I consider this game to have actual spells rather than creatures. So, I forgot to mention, so how there's colorless mana, there are also colorless creatures. So this is a colorless creature. My bad. As you can see, just pay any 4 mana of any color you want, and you can just make this creature. He's colorless. He has no color. So pretty cool. My bad. I forgot this photo was in here. Let's move on into the other types of spells. So this is what is known as an artifact. An artifact is kind of like I would say related to a continuous spell or continuous trap card for Yu-Gi-Oh! So you would pay 1 generic mana in order to play this card, and then it has a little tap icon, the little turnaround arrow. That means to tap that card sideways, and it allows you to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. So I, as a new beginner, was like, this doesn't seem useful. I'll just play a land instead of playing this card in my deck. Well, let me explain to you why this card is probably good if you want to play Magic the Gathering. You should always include a Soul Ring in your deck, because you play a land, your opponent plays a land, you play a land, your opponent plays a land. You both have 2 lands, and you can tap for 2 mana. Cool. You're basically on the same mana wavelength. You just keep getting 1 each turn. But let's say you play a land and you tap that land to play the Soul Ring. You can then tap that Soul Ring to play a card that costs 2 generic mana. So now you have a Soul Ring and a land. So by the time it comes back to your turn, your opponent only played their first land. Now it's your turn. You play your second land onto the field, and you can tap your Soul Ring for 2 mana. So now you can play a card that costs 4 mana, whereas you'd only be able to play a card that costs 2 mana. So that's why Soul Ring is just really good, and I wanted to include this specific artifact in the list. Again, you put your artifacts, everything that stays on the field, you put them where you like them. Just keep track of it. Now, I don't know why I included this. It says add 2 to your mana pool. This is Soul Ring again, but just a different artwork. It just says add 2 instead of add the 2 colorless right there in the symbols. At the bottom, it just says add 2. So that's what I think I did that just to tie in the whole colorless and the the gray background with numbers. I think that's why I included that in there. We're going to move on into enchantments, though. So enchantments are more like a field spell for Yu-Gi-Oh! They can affect both players, or they can affect just you. So an enchantment, this specific one says it has flash. That means you can play this card during your turn or your opponent's turn if it says it has flash, which is a pretty cool keyword. It says this enchantment enters with X fire counters on it. So you see at the top right, it costs 3 red mana to play it, and X. So X is whatever amounts of mana you want to include in there. After you've already paid the 3 red, you then can pay more mana, however much you want, for the X cost. So you could tap 3 red and 10 more red mana, or a mixed match of multiple colors, doesn't matter. And that means this enchantment would enter with X fire counters on it. So let's say you tapped 10 for the X cost. It came in with 10 fire counters on it. The rest of the effect says if a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus an amount of damage equal to the number of fire counters on this enchantment instead. So since we tapped 10 extra to pay for it, it has 10 fire counters on it. So if a source you control would deal damage, like say my enchantment dealt damage, or my creature dealt damage, or my spell dealt damage, it would deal that much plus 10 more damage because there was 10 fire counters on this card. So pretty cool card. Moving on from enchantments, we have sorceries. These are more like the average regular spell cards. You can only really play sorceries during your turn unless they have that flash ability, kind of like enchantments. You can only play enchantments during your turn. With the exception of that, because he has flash, and flash says you can play this card during either player's turn. But sorceries are like your regular normal spells. This one just says each player discards all the cards in their hand and then draws that many cards, -1. So it's a pretty dark deal. It's kind of scummy, but I hear Black is all about filling up that grave to do graveyard shenanigans. So, pretty cool. And that's all about sorcery. That's it. Moving on with instants. Instants are going to be more like that flash ability. So instant cards say that you can play them during your turn or your opponent's turn. So these are more like trap cards or quick play spells or counter trap cards. Not really counter traps, but instants do have more counter trap abilities. Kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh does, if they say to counter target spell or whatever. This one only costs 1 blue mana to play, and it says to target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains hexproof until end of turn, and to untap that creature. So it explains at the bottom, hexproof is a keyword, and it explains it. It says it can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponent controls, your opponent's control. So that's what the hexproof ability does. But yeah, that is pretty much all of the cards and kind of what they do. So that's going to be all for part 1. I don't know how many parts I'm going to do, but I hope you guys stuck around to this part of the video. If you did, make sure to comment down below, I made it, ! And make sure to leave a like, comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe and be looking out for part 2, guys. All right, that's going to be it. Peace out.